Welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 43. Hello everyone, welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I am your host, Don Cardenas. Hope you're all doing great. I am currently barely holding on to this schedule and keeping up with things to recommend and all that. It's been pretty hectic. The art schedule has been, it's probably my busiest month I've ever scheduled myself. And of course, naturally, I end up hurting my wrist and drastically slowing myself down for a few days. But things are on the up and up. I'm working towards keeping things moving. If nothing else, there's plenty of great interviews lined up. So if I don't get to recommend some things for everybody, you at least have, what you're all really here for anyway, right? Talking to the guests, because I have amazing people who come on the show, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. But this week I do have some recommendations, so let's pop right into those. My first recommendation is not comics, it is comic related. It is the TV show MODOK on Hulu. I wasn't interested in this at all, to be honest. I liked Robot Chicken enough when it came out, and seeing something done in that style nowadays, I was just like, I don't know. And MODOK, and though there's great people involved, Patton Oswalt, and the other voice cast, Melissa Fumero, Bill Hader, just Kevin Michael Richardson. There's Ben Schwartz. It's just, I don't know. I was not looking forward to it, but enough people have spoke about it online. I'm like, what? I'll give it a shot, and I am incredibly glad I did. It is way funnier than I expected to be. Way more violent than I ever expected it to be. And also, it has a surprising amount of emotional warmth and depth to it. Much more than I would ever expect for a MODOK show. So I think the creator Jordan Blum and Pat Oswalt, they did an amazing job. I'm all for the show now. The cast is great. The storyline's great. If you're unaware, it's basically follows MODOK, the giant-headed supervillain from the Marvel Universe, as he struggles with trying to hold on to running AIM, his supervillain, science-based supervillain organization, and managing life as a dad and husband in New Jersey. So it sounds crazy. It hits some of those sitcom type notes and experiences, or I guess tropes, so to speak. But it's all done in a really fun way, and I'm really enjoying it. So MODOK, it's on Hulu. And if you got it, definitely worth checking out. It's funny, kind of sweet sometimes, and just shockingly violent in places. And side note, it's weird seeing just X-Men type characters show up in the show and things like that, because I'm so used to this divide with the MCU and Marvel and all that, and the X-Men properties being owned somewhere else. So it's weird seeing that pop up. It's not a spoiler, but you'll see a cameo by Mr. Sinister, and it's like, oh, I never would expect that. It's awesome, but I never would have expected that. So I'm a few episodes in. It's been really good so far, and it's just really entertaining. I don't think you can go wrong with checking this out. So MODOK, Hulu, definitely worth it. Okay, so once again this week we are sponsored by Nosk of the Void, the awesome black metal project from comic book artist Chuck Beebe. Again, I've stated thousands of times before on the show, and will continue to state, I am a fan of this album. I'm a fan of Chuck's. I'm stoked that we have some digital codes to give away, and last week I laid out how to get a free digital code to download the album off of Bandcamp, and I may have made it a little more complicated than need to, I guess. We just want to give this music away to people. We want people to enjoy it and just just rock out to this music. It's great stuff. And I had a few questions about it, and so I'm going to address a little bit of that right now. First off, it's on Bandcamp, bandcamp.com. Bandcamp's free. In that you make an account, it's free. You don't have to pay to be an account member for Bandcamp. You pay bands to download the music and all that. A lot of bands have their stuff up for streaming, but you can stream from Bandcamp. Some might be limited in how many times you can do it, but to have an account with Bandcamp, it's free. And it's awesome because you can find so many cool, just mainstream type of bands and music from Bandcamp. It's really awesome. I highly recommend checking it out. And to get a free digital code from Bandcamp for Nosk of the Void, I'm changing the rules a little bit. A lot, actually. Making it very simple for everybody. Just contact me in any way, shape, or form. You want to send a DM to Twitter, an email to comicscoffeemetal@gmail.com. You want to send, a brick through my window. I wouldn't recommend that, but if that's what you wanted to do, go ahead with your contact info. You may need to pay for the window, but you will get a free link and download code for Nosk of the Void. Super simple. Once again, just contact the show in any way through my Twitter at DonCardenasArt, comicscoffeemetal@gmail.com, at CMXCoffeeMetal on Twitter. Anything. DMs are open. Let me know you want this. You'll get the code instantly. Alright? Now let's jam a little more Nosk before we get to my music recommendation. Okay, so my music recommendation this week is the band Spiritbox. Spiritbox is made up of the husband and wife duo of singer Courtney LaPlante and guitarist Mike Stringer, formerly of I Wrestled the Bear Once, which is a really cool and fun name, and I'll have to check out their former band just based on that alone. But Spiritbox is a pretty new band. They don't formally have an album out. They have an EP out that came out in 2017, and lately they've just been releasing some singles and stuff like that. But I'm really enjoying what they're putting out, and I'm really looking forward to their album release. But they have enough music out to where I think I can recommend them to people to kind of get them jazzed up for the full-length album that's coming out in September. So Spiritbox definitely falls in the modern metal type category, but a lot of their stuff is very atmospheric, and their singer Courtney is really talented, and their guitar player is really talented. And the stuff they write, it's very catchy, it's very heavy, but it's also, not overtly, I guess, pop-ish or anything like that. The track of theirs that I've been just playing the most, called Circle With Me, it has a lot of the stuff that I dig. It has a really cool riff, it has a nice breakdown, some great screaming vocals from Courtney, but also some really cool atmospheric singing and instrumentation during the verses. It reminds me a lot of this other band that I enjoy called The Birthday Massacre, where it's kind of gothy, almost like a haunting type melody, and the lyrics are really cool, and yeah, they're just a band I'm starting to get pretty stoked about hearing their new album. the rest of the singles off of the album are more, I guess, laid back, more ballady, but it's definitely really good heavy stuff in terms of sound and feel. Not necessarily heavy in terms of, guitars. But based on the single Circle With Me, I'm full on expecting some just riff heavy, just pure assault type stuff on the album. They have an EP, self-titled EP that came out a few years ago. That's also really good. But the stuff they're doing now is definitely a band that's gelled and matured. And they're gonna. I got a feeling when they release this album, it's gonna be something big. It's gonna be probably one of the more hyped up releases of 2021. So, as I mentioned, I've been really digging the single Circle With Me, so here's a bit of that. Spiritbox, the album Eternal Blue, is coming out September 17th. Check it out. Okay, now on to my guest. We have the awesome and super talented Matt Smith. As I mentioned last week, Matt Smith is the artist of the book Lake of Fire, which I heavily recommended. And Matt was a phenomenal talent, and he was a really cool guy to talk to. And the amount of time we spent talking outside the actual recording probably equaled or exceeded the actual recording time. It was a lot of fun chatting with him. We get into a lot of fun stuff, talking about a return to cons, his appreciation of metal, and also his appreciation, kind of his inspirations he draws from folklore and fantasy in his work, and his series Barbarian Lord and all that. So yeah, Matt's an awesome dude. He's really great dude to follow on Twitter. He's always posting awesome sketches to links to cool music, and yeah, I'm just so stoked I got a chance to talk to him. He's been vocal and letting me know he's been enjoying the show and listening to some of the past episodes, and I know he'll be listening to this because it's his episode. So Matt, verbally, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It was so cool getting to talk to him. Really excited for you guys to hear this. Matt is awesome, and if you disagree, then I hope you are just enjoying being wrong all the time then. Alright, let's get to it. Matt Smith, let's go. Okay, Matt, so I've been a fan of your artwork for quite some time. I really am kind of envious of the not only ability you have, but just the way you approach things and the style you have. It's so far removed from what I do, but it's one of those things where it's like, I wish I could figure out how to operate like that. Okay. And so much of your work is rooted in like this fantasy folklorish, just kind of mythic type stuff, and that's just, again, just so far up my alley with things that it just feeds that beast. So before I pick you apart and with questions about art and all these other things, I have to ask you, comics, coffee, metal, what are you digging right now?
All right, I'll get the least interesting one out of the way. I think not that coffee isn't interesting. It's just like, fuel, I think like I need it. I got to start the day with it. And then I hit like a 10 o'clock coffee break that I need to take, and then like another at 3 or something like that. And so I will get whatever is at hand. I drink a lot of instant, which I'm sure there's moans and groans going on from real coffee fans. It just sort of depends how intense the deadlines are. It takes no time to make like a proper cup of coffee, but like mentally, I'm just like, I don't have time to think about waiting for a pour over. I just need this now. And so I always have instant handy. But there were like times in my life where I was like I'm going to grow up and I'm going to get like good beans and I got a grinder, and every once in a while that will happen. And then I'll be like, oh my God, this is like a really good cup of coffee. And I should, time is never so dire that I can't take 10 minutes or whatever it takes to make a proper cup of coffee. But, I say that in the moment and then it's like back to the instant the next day. So yeah, I'll go all over the place. I have like high aspirations sometimes, but it generally ends up being sort of on the low end.
Well, I can understand that mentality about it. Oh, by instant, do you mean like literal, like little packets you pour into hot water, or are you talking about like a Keurig or?
Oh yeah, like what do I have right now? Nescafe, Taster's Choice. Taster's Choice is actually kind of high end for that realm. I actually think it tastes pretty good. And then I'll go lower than that. It kind of just depends on what store I'm in and how desperate I am for coffee,
I can't say that, I could be the same way. I'm not, again, I won't consider myself a coffee snob, but I definitely have a threshold of what I would be like okay with drinking on a regular basis.
It's good that we're on just like an audio thing and not with video, because I can imagine your raised eyebrow.
No, I don't coffee shame or metal shame or comic shame.
Okay.
Whatever's got to get you through the day, right?
Right. Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's as long as it can legally still be called coffee, fine.
Yeah. But so that's the whole coffee story. But it's, it's necessary. So
yeah,
so it works its way into, little sketches a lot. Cause I'm just like, it's a required piece of equipment, like a pen or anything else,
Yeah.
But as far as, I'm quick to leave this behind. As far as comics go, oh man, what have I picked up recently? Have you heard of I Walk with Monsters by the artist is, I'm picking up the book now, Sally Cantorino?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that book, and I've seen a lot of the social media art being posted and stuff like that, and it looks really cool. I just have not gotten to it yet myself.
Yeah, it's very good. I see Sally's artwork on Twitter, and I always like it. And then when I found out she had this book out, I think it's actually been out for a little while. And then when I went in for a COVID shot, there's a comic book store near where I got it, and I walked in and said, "Oh, there's Sally's book," and yeah, it's just like it's beautifully drawn. The story's very dark. I don't usually even look for horror comic books. Mm-hmm. It's not like my first go-to. Like I said, I'm more drawn towards fantasy, that kind of thing. But I was grabbed immediately by the story. Good story by what's his? Cornell's the last name. I'm not sure.
Paul Cornell.
Paul, yeah. So the story's good, and I really like the art, and so that I would recommend. I thought that was that's something I'm really interested in finding out how the rest of the story goes. Let's see, what else have I got around here? Not exactly a comic book, but I recently got Lawrence Campbell. He works on like BPRD, cowboy stuff.
Yeah,
like one of his sketchbooks, the second sketchbook, and that's just mind blowing. I'm flipping through it now, though you can't see that. But his artwork, I really feel like his artwork goes like you have like people with technical skill that you can appreciate, and then sometimes. It's like with music too. It's like sometimes someone is so good that they go past that technical stage, and then it's just like they just hit things on an emotional level, if that makes any sense, And
yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, and like I feel like he well, you can tell when someone knows so well how to draw that they can do stuff that, you know, they can really get more. I don't know. I don't want to say like abstract, because all of this stuff is pretty precise. But he's just got more of like a nice.
Their shorthand is like for details and stuff like that. It's
yeah.
I kind of feel the way that way about, you know, some of your stuff, and you know, just when it's kind of the thing where if I'm looking at a drawing and I see someone like, oh, you know, there's a hand, and then like each finger is not completely separated by a line. It kind of like merges together, and there's like a little tiny gap between two of the fingers or something, but it looks like a hand or whatever, and it looks, you know, it's just that little choice there. I'm like, my brain can't do that. It's like I gotta make sure I have every little fingered, and it's not to say one way is better or the other, but it's also like I wish I could like process the information that way, so I don't have to, so I can draw where I don't have to make sure every single, you know, crease of a finger is noted in a hand or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I do feel like I have to, like, I'm always criticizing every little line I'm doing. I feel like, you know, and then I look at something like Lawrence's work, and I just, you know, he's got all that, but he just seems to, you know, he's just got a more expressive, beautiful, sort of brushy style that I'm just kind of in awe of. You know, it looks great on, you know, all these sketches, and the fact that he can carry it through in sequential art is kind of amazing to me. It's amazing to me when someone can, you know, I'd be so happy to just be able to like pull off one illustration like he works, and that they can fill a book with it. I'm always pretty stunned by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess it goes to show, like, you know, every artist has the artist. They're like, no, this guy, this person, like, they have it figured out. I don't know Jack. They have this figured out. Like,
I'm always amazed with that. Like, I don't want to just start, you know, because they come from private conversations. You don't want to start rattling off stuff. But I contacted a few artists that I just really like, and when they say stuff like that, I'm like, you're just being nice. You know, when they're like, don't, you know, I have no idea what I'm doing. Don't ask me. I'm like, that can't be true.
Well, it's that's an imposter syndrome that, you know, everyone on every level kind of has.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's good for tempering an ego, and other times it's like, can I just believe in myself for a little bit here?
Right. There's a nice medium that, you know, that we'd all like to find, I think, you know.
I think, you know, that's one thing I do miss about cons, because like we were talking a little bit before the show, and, you know, I mentioned I only do one really big show, but it's a big show, so I usually like to pick up a lot of sketchbooks and stuff from there, and, you know, I kind of miss that a bit, even though I technically did the big show last year because it happened just before everything shut down. You know, it feels so long in between, because it would have happened already again this year by now, but it's not going to happen now till hopefully December. We'll see. But
when does it usually happen?
C2E2 usually happens. Is usually like early spring. Then like last year they had it like at the end of February in Chicago for God knows what reason. They thought a con in end of February winter would be a great idea. But thankfully, I guess it worked out, because we were all, you know, everyone was able to do the show and all that just before things shut down. But now they're doing it in early December, which a lot of people are like, oh my God, Chicago in December, like that's going to be brutal. I'm like, well, it's different. Early December winter is different than late February winter.
Sure.
Like, you're on the East Coast, you know the difference. Like,
yeah, there's kind of like a magic charm to when I
exactly. I said everything.
Yeah,
it's pretty much what I said. Like, Christmas hasn't happened yet. The holiday season hasn't happened yet. When snow comes, it's like, oh, snow. And, you know, it's like, oh, you know, things are, you know, it hasn't been like -5 for 4 days straight. Like, yeah, it's just been, you know, oh, got to make sure I have my jacket and my scarf, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's different. It's different. Like, don't stress out about the weather. It's, you know, 30 degrees in December is different than 30 degrees in February. Just trust me on this.
It'd be nice to, like, you know, shop for people who like comics and related things, you know.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, you know, the world has, or at least the United States has, you know, gotten some damn sense knocked into it by then, and we're, at a level to where the show can be really well attended and people feel safe and all that. But yeah, I miss getting the sketchbooks and stuff like that, because that was always the most, one of the almost more fun to me than reading the comics from my buddies and all that, just seeing their process and, kind of seeing how their minds are working a little bit, figuring a thing out.
Yeah, sure.
It kind of, opens up a little bit of insight. And, a lot of sketchbooks now, I can't talk because my one and only sketchbook is literally just finished pieces. It's not really a sketchbook. But yeah, there are more art books now than sketchbooks. But,
Right.
yeah, it's just, I think it's something that I just, you brought that up, so I'm just like, I kind of miss that. Having access to all those or getting new ones and looking forward to getting new ones of those.
Yeah.
So
How is, like, I can only imagine that's a great show. It just seems like Chicago is like, I've been once because my brother-in-law has a restaurant. He owns a restaurant out in Colorado, and there was a restaurant trade show in Chicago.
Mm-hmm,
I don't know if that happens regularly or if it just changes city to city.
Yeah. Well, McCormick Place in Chicago is this huge convention center, not unlike New York Javits Center or whatever. And it's always hosting expos and things like that. And yeah, there's a lot of cooking and restaurant shows and things like that. My wife actually works in the food industry, and I know there's big shows that happen there, I think a couple times a year, for food vendors and things like that. So
yeah, so my wife and I went out to meet her sister and her husband, and so we were in Chicago for a couple of days. And first of all, man, that's a beautiful city. It's very, both my wife and I knows how clean it is. I don't know how that happens, but it's not that Boston is like terribly dirty, but Chicago, just for its size and everything, it just seemed, it seemed kind of immaculate. I was like, maybe there's a lot of, civic pride here or something.
No, they just shove all the dirt to the south side. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, it is kind of surprising how clean Chicago is when you hear stories of like New York or but from what I've heard, like Los Angeles is either like the dirtiest city on the planet or the most immaculate place on the planet. I guess it changes from block to block. But Chicago's got its dirty points, but downtown Chicago is usually kept on a pretty tight leash with being clean and all that.
Yeah, we went to, I don't know, I feel like we went to a couple good record shops. I can't remember the names, but we went to Quimby's,
mm-hmm.
and it just, I don't know, it seemed like an area where there'd be pretty great shows, comic shows,
Yeah, I love it. Obviously, I was born and raised in Chicago. I live around 40 miles north of it now, but it's still an hour away. So yeah, it is a great show. Like I, mentioned before, like I do pretty well there. I'm like nobody, so I managed to turn a decent profit at every show. I know that's not always the case for everybody. It's really kind of a, cons are kind of the thing where it's like, unless you're like super well established and all that, you can't really count on having a good show.
Yeah.
But I've been lucky enough to have, each show be a little bit better than the last one. But yeah, it is great. People are very enthusiastic. Chicago is just filthy with great comic shops. It's stacked to the gills with great creators.
Yeah, it's a good filthy.
We got Ryan Brown, we got Mike Norton, we got Tim Seeley. We got so many that I'm like, oh, they're from Chicago, and it's like, yeah, there's so many great creators in the area that it's even just if it pulled from local talent alone, it'd be a great show. But
and does that equate to like a I can't think about it. Like scene always sounds so annoying, but like a good scene, like
Um,
And just it's just interesting to find out if there's sort of an active community of it, or like does it or
I can only speak to my personal experience, and that's mainly centered around the shop Challengers Comics in Chicago. Because they're friends with a lot of the local creators, and they were my main shop. Well, I guess technically they are my main shop. I just don't go to a shop very often anymore. But that's kind of where I fell back in love with comics and started drawing again and all that myself. And that's where I met a lot of these guys, a lot of the community of like Mike Norton and Tim Seeley and Ryan Brown. Like I met Ryan Brown, I think when everyone else in Chicago did, at a 24-hour comic book day, where he was just blowing our minds with this hilarious comic that he was drawing, and it's like, what is going, like, what? And like, who is this guy?
yeah.
God who hates what? And yeah, so when in the before times, as they say, I think there was at least I don't know. I'm not really like I'm more of a homebody type person, so I don't really like go out to the drink and draws and do that stuff. But I know there was quite a community kind of centered around probably just over a decade ago. Because Scotty Young was here for a while, and they had a lot of drink and draws and things like that. And Devil's Due was in Chicago. I don't know if they're still in Chicago, but that a lot of those guys came from around there, that company and all that. And I think it's a very welcoming community. Oh, I can forget Daniel Warren Johnson's in Chicago. Like,
oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, we stole him from Boston, right? So,
right, yeah.
He's on our team now. Comics speaking. But yeah, it from my own personal experience, everyone I've met has been like super welcoming and super open, and this like, there's no air of like, I'm an established professional and you're some newbie and I'm gonna, treat you that way.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like excited and happy, and I think a lot of it, if you're familiar with the people I've been naming, listener, you know what I'm talking about. These are just great people, and it's just, so I think there's a possibility of like it being a really great scene, but it's kind of hard to judge it now just because I think just things have gotten kind of weird, obviously, with the pandemic and all that.
Sure.
And just, I don't know, it kind of felt, and again, I'm removed now because I used to work in Chicago, so that's why I was going to Challengers, even though I lived an hour away. So yeah, I feel like I kind of felt like it was kind of something I was kind of being pulled apart, and it's probably just more like a lot of these creators, they're getting older, some of them are starting families and things like that, so not everyone's coming to do the big events and at the get-togethers and stuff like that. But if you're a creator in Chicago and you meet another comic book creator in Chicago, I've never had a bad experience. I've never had anyone.
Yeah, and similar to you, I don't really get out I don't really get out all that much in general. But I get a sense that it's a pretty tight, pretty.
It's
tight
very supportive. It is very supportive.
Yeah.
Everyone's rooting for each other, even if you're giving each other shit. They support each other a lot, and the shops are especially. I have not met a shop worker or owner who has been like not like treating me just like any other creator they would have when I came with my book and like, hey, do you have a indie section I can put this in or whatever? Like everyone was like, excited about comics and excited, treat you well. Cause there was that stigma with shop owners too. And while that may be true for some in Chicago, especially for when I was growing up in Chicago, there's one in particular.
Yeah.
Oh God. I'm going to bring this name up, and I know a lot of people are going to like recognize it if you're in Chicago, but Variety Comics, it was like literally in a basement of an apartment building.
Yeah.
And the minute you walked in there, like I was a kid, and the minute you walk in there, like the owners like yell at you not to mess anything up. It was literally like the dank dark hole of everything. But it was also like an exciting experience too, because you felt like you shouldn't be in there. but as long as you spent money, you were tolerated.
Yeah.
But now customer service is key.
And
flip to I don't know if you've been to, you mentioned you went to Quimby's. I don't know if you stopped by Challengers Comics because they're right by there.
I probably did. We went to a few, but my memory is horrible. And this is also probably 8 years ago or something. So, I don't know if much has changed.
Challengers, they were definitely around. I think they just hit they're in their decade. They're past the double digits right now. So, but yeah, they're Patrick and Dal, the owners. They're just the best people. Like they're just so excited about comics, and they're very professional. And Patrick's actually a pretty decent buddy, and he's actually collaborated with me on some of the songs I've done.
That's awesome.
Because he's a pretty killer singer too. So. And a big metalhead himself. He was actually the first guest on the podcast.
Okay. I haven't listened to them all. And about just.
He was the first guest back when I was doing a video show. So so I think I did the first few episodes as a video thing, and then when I realized, I just finally gave up on my computer actually being able to handle rendering any video because it was so old and crappy. I just kind of shelved it for a while, and then once I got a better computer and a more structured schedule, I'm like, all right, let me pick this back up, but audio only. Even with a better computer, video still takes way too long. But yeah, so to answer your question, yeah, Chicago's a good city.
We've established that. And obviously a lot of good music comes out of there as well. I immediately think of like the old like Ministry and that kind of stuff.
Trax Records and things like that. So metal, what's doing for you for metal?
Oh boy, let's see. I haven't picked up a ton of metal recently. I'm just going to lose all my credentials. Press the coffee. No, but like today I got a couple of ambient records in the mail by Lossel. Have you ever heard of him, Scott Morgan?
No, I've not.
Okay, it's not metal, so I shouldn't talk about it. But anyways, good stuff. So do check it out.
You can talk about whatever you're digging.
Let's see. Yesterday I picked up a song, just a single the guy released. It's I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Defod, D-E-F-O-D. It's a black metal black metal guy from Wales. I'm actually not even a huge black metal fan. I like some of it like I like anything else, but it's not really something I actively seek out. But like this is the kind of stuff that I do like. Like it's focused on the area that he's from. And I think he describes it as like ritualistic sounds that describe the landscapes and mountains, and it just rips really. But it's got sort of a historical vibe to it, talking about what these sort of stone formations or things like that are in the area he lives in Wales, and that's excellent stuff. And he also comes from, I heard about him because he comes from this other Welsh band, Emissaries of Sin, who are great. I don't even know how to describe them. They call themselves grind and roll. So although, I'm not sure that's what I would have thought of immediately, but that's more of a, they're definitely not black metal, whatever you want to call them. But this guy, Raz, who's in Defod, is the guitarist in Emissaries of Sin. And they're both great. So, he releases albums, or at least he's released one album I picked up. But this was, something people do nowadays is they'll just, drop one song that you can pick up. And it was a pretty neat song about a sword. Like reading the lyrics, you figured out it's about, forging like a Bronze Age sword.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I dig it. It ties into all the sort of historical stuff I love, and then again, it's it's excellent music. It's atmospheric, which I guess you'd say about a lot of black metal. Um, I'm not a huge black metal fan, but like I love all the music that led, not all the music, but I love a lot of the music that led into black metal that like was retroactively termed the first wave of black metal, stuff like Celtic Frost and Bathory, probably Sodom. There's a lot of these bands that they weren't called black metal when I was picking up their albums, but I think they were inspirational. And so they got that name attached to them later on. And, there's some stuff that's black metal that I really dig, like the second wave, the stuff that I would actually call black metal, Dark Throne, I like quite a bit. And although I found them more interesting, as they go along, like I like their new stuff a lot more than what would be their classic black metal period, which is good. I like that stuff. And I like it because I can hear where, the bands that inspired them, I can hear those moments. I can hear Celtic Frost and that kind of stuff in those early Dark Throne albums. But I've never been like a black metal fan for that, when it all sort of broke with, whatever in the 90s with Emperor and,
Mayhem and stuff like that. And
yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's, I don't know. I don't know how far I want to go into all of that.
Well, I'll just say this. The type of black metal you've described is kind of the stuff that I find in my initial forays into getting into that is the stuff I tend to like. The stuff that's more atmospheric. It's kind of, telling like a folklorish bent to it, or kind of like talking about landscapes, like just almost abstract type stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Not so much the let's burn a church.
It seems like it's, there's a lot of things that get really, what's the word, codified or something, like,
yeah.
And that, that just gets kind of boring, it's and the thing that I like so much about that sort of wave of musicians that got labeled as the first wave of black metal, it was also different. I didn't even know what to call it back when I was finding it, because it was just like, well, this is just weird metal from Switzerland or Germany, or you sort of name it by the country rather than those genres didn't exist yet, I don't think, or at least not that I knew about. Like I wouldn't have called anything death metal or black metal, but sort of retroactively, I guess they got titled those things, or they developed into them, or they again, they certainly inspired bands who went on to be under those genre names. And again, it's not like I don't like plenty of black metal and death metal. It's just once something gets a genre term and it stays within those parameters, it gets less interesting.
Yeah. It's, genres are great. Naming thing as genre is great to kind of like give you an idea of what it is or whatever. But yeah, it's when things, are being conformed to fit within that, or you're expecting something to conform to your expectation of that. That's when it just gets kind of I always liked black metal's like aesthetic and vibe, like the lo-fi, the just kind of almost it made it seem more dangerous, more like just
for sure,
like a hidden thing you shouldn't be listening to, and things like that. And metal does, when metal takes itself too seriously is kind of when it just kind of like a slight wall starts forming for me between that particular thing. Not that metal can't take itself seriously, because I love Gojira and they're very serious.
Oh yeah. No, I totally get where you're coming from, and there's like the black metal. Like I love the sort of idea of these guys, running around in the woods with wolves or what, this kind of. But when I've seen a couple documentaries, and then when I sometimes like, oh wait, these guys are just kind of like, not this is not everyone, but just some people being interviewed. These are just kind of like misanthropic like jerks with some kind of backwards ideas about other human beings. Then it's like, oh, that's not the fun fantasy thing I had in my head about some guy.
This guy doesn't live in a cave.
He's not carving runes into a tree or something awesome.
You're in a shack behind your parents' house, and you're
saying really, questionable things about other people.
There was a documentary I watched, and I think it was on YouTube, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was about some one man black metal bands.
Oh, and there was like 3 different guys or something.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah. There's one that's called Before the Light Takes Us, but I don't think that's the one. I think that's a different black metal documentary.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one was like really interesting to me because it's just like these super revered in their own community, black metal guys, and it's just like, I think one guy was literally like just in a shed or like a cabin or something, and just like it's just like the most unassuming thing.
Yeah, no, that was pretty good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Hopefully I can find it, and I'll try to put it in the show notes and all that. But yeah, it was definitely interesting. And that's kind of like what I like about black metal and all that. And then there's the stuff where you get into the not great,
yeah, man, it's such a minefield. Like I feel like I have to like fully like do an investigation of any band.
Yeah, exactly.
Them,
hold on, is there a Wikipedia entry on these guys? Like, or search their name on Google, whatever, Nazi, whatever, church burn, whatever, murder, like,
yeah.
Like, are these just like? Can I feel good listening to this or not?
Yeah, exactly. And there was, there was some, I can't remember the name of the band now, so this is useless. But I just remember the description being, this is like one of my favorite albums of all time is Bathory's Hammerheart. I just love that album. And it was described as like, oh, Bathory's Hammerheart meets, I'm going to get this wrong, Basil Polidorus, the Conan soundtrack, which I also love. It was like, this album is these 2 things, but also this guy is a huge Nazi, It's just like, oh, I want to listen to that so bad. Or I wanted to listen to that so bad when those first 2 things were mentioned. And then like, now I never will listen to it. And, but, I mean, I get that it's like, I get that there's a lot of stuff that is like misanthropic, but there's I'm not bothered by someone who just hates mankind in general. That's a certain,
you kind of deserve it.
yeah. But then there's obviously something else that's pretty different from that. But yeah, so yeah, Defod, getting back to that, that's really good. I picked that up. What else did I pick up recently? I'm going to actually look at my recent purchases. I don't know if this counts as metal. I bought Hum. Do you know Hum? I bought their new album.
I mean,
they're from Chicago, right? Or somewhere near there?
I believe so. They're heavy. They can get heavy. They have the vibe, I believe.
I mean, they disappeared for like, 20-something years, and that album came out, and it is just like exactly picking up where they left off. And in a good way, not in this band is just, rehashing. It's just, I was really surprised by that album. I thought it was great. It's, it's kind of.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying, I think my buddy and former guest, Dave Jordan, he was really talking about that album when it came out. Because I think he's a pretty big Hum fan.
Yeah, I was really surprised. It was someone I kind of wrote off back in the day for like that really stupid reason of like, oh, they have the big radio hit, and so I'm not going to possibly find anything good about this. And so, and I actually didn't think that song was that bad, but I don't know. I just didn't have any interest. It was that Train to Mars song or something. And then I listened to their album after that one. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I like this. And then for whatever reason, I forgot about them, and then this new album came out. And it was one of those things. I think every once in a while I'll go through like band camps, like new and notable, or, and I saw the album and it seemed to come out of nowhere. I don't think they did like a lot of promotion for it, because I think I posted about it online somewhere, just like, oh wow, Hum came back after 20 something years, and like other Hum fans were like, wow, what, and so I don't think it was like heavily promoted, and then that's a solid album. I picked up let's see, a remaster of the first Yezu album, this Godflesh Justin Broderick project, Yezu.
Yeah, I've been meaning to check it out because I've heard a lot about it. I mean, I love it, but it's one of those things, almost like Godflesh too. It's hard to recommend a specific thing because it kind of travels all over the place, which is something I love about Broderick's music. He's like, he definitely doesn't lock himself into one thing. I'm sorry. Actually, I think you recommended it to me. I checked it out. I'm pretty sure I remember because I did a quick search myself. I'm like, why is it in my library? And I'm like, oh no, wait. I'm pretty sure you recommended it to me.
I babble about Broderick stuff all the time. I feel like that's someone I've just consistently think is amazing since I first heard. Whatever Godflesh album I heard first, Street Cleaner, I think. Just because it's so different. Like that was something that was out on Earache, which was at least, I took it as like a death metal label, because when I heard of Earache, it was Napalm Death and Carcass and Bolt Thrower and all this stuff. And so, I just assumed Godflesh would be, it was one of those things where I just bought anything with the Earache label on the cover, the pre-internet kind of, this is the way you did it. You're just like, okay, you'd look in the band list, or, the band thank you list, see the other bands they thanked, and they're like, okay, I'll try that. And then if you found a good label, a good, someone who just seemed to consistently pick good bands, then you just follow that for a while. And so, I mean, Godflesh was so different than everything else. They were harsh and, apocalyptic, and so it kind of fit with all the death metal, but they definitely weren't death metal. I don't even know how I describe them now. Like some people would compare them to like Ministry, just because they put them both under the industrial metal label, but I don't really think that works either. And in fact, like maybe not Street Cleaner, but Pure, like some of it reminded me more of like The Cure than like really heavy like The Cure than Ministry. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But Yezu is a project he came up with after he disbanded Godflesh. I mean, he has a bunch of projects, but it was probably the one that was most similar, like a guitar driven at first. And that's the thing about Yezu, is that there's like very different types of albums. Some is like really sort of almost electronica or something, and some is sort of more heavy guitar leaning. But Heartache was the first release, and that was very much, the Godflesh was definitely very much still in that, sort of repetitive and mesmerizing, but very heavy, which is what I loved about Godflesh first hearing them. It wasn't like screaming. Well, it was, but it wasn't like it was almost as mesmerizing as it was crushing, which is what I loved about it. It was kind of, I don't know. I'm going to really sort of lose you on this one trying to describe it.
You've described it pretty well, I think. And I checked. It was Heartache that you recommended to me, and everything you just said is just like I would agree with, because now I remember checking that out. And this kind of like segues into a question we got from Twitter from at Anti-Drummer, John Westhoff. He wants to know, are you pro or anti remastering old albums?
Okay, here's another funny thing, is that I have such a tin ear, I think, for this kind of stuff. Like I really respond to songwriting. But like, I'm going to keep this all in the Godflesh vein. I remember first joining like a Godflesh forum and meeting other Godflesh fans for the first time, because I think like I knew only like two of them in the town I grew up in, and we all had sort of the same opinion. And so it was shocking to me to meet like a whole like global community of Godflesh fans, and which has been amazing, by the way. Like, I don't want to go off on too much of a side thing, but so many of those people are, online friends, but real friends. And now, that I met through this message board, which is now a Facebook group. And, these things, like everyone abandoned the message boards, I think, when Facebook started. I heard about this with like other like art groups and stuff. They just naturally drifted somewhere else. But like that guy, when I mentioned Emissaries of Sin earlier, that Welsh band, that's a guy I met through the Godflesh message board. And, he's from Wales. And then he came here, he visited Boston on his way to the Maryland Death Fest. So, I got to show him around a little bit. So that was fun. And then like another guy from Australia came to like his brother's wedding in New York, and I met him from the Godflesh message board. And then we went and saw it was so amazing that Godflesh happened to be playing in New York when he was coming to his brother's wedding. So I got to go see Godflesh with this dude from Australia, and that was great. And now I'm forgetting what I'm talking about. Oh yeah. So I met all these people. And I was just like, what? People have different opinions about Godflesh and like what defines them, because there's so many like elements to them that you could come in as a metal fan, you could come in as I don't know. There's like a lot of different routes into getting into Broderick's music, and but for whatever reason, this didn't occur to me when I first started going on this board. I just figured everyone came in the death metal road and figured it out that way, But Pure is my favorite Godflesh album. It's their second proper album. They have like an EP I always think of it as their first album, but then, so I think Street Cleaner is technically their first real album, and then Pure is the second album. And Pure is my favorite. And there's people on that board who couldn't listen to it because they were just like, oh my God, the production is so terrible. Because I guess it was recorded on some sort of like portable 8-track thing.
Okay.
And I know next to nothing about like I was in a high school band for a very short time. And that was my only experience, like trying to make music. And we just basically did like Celtic Frost covers. And I think we might've had one original that wasn't very original. And so it was like mind blowing to me to hear people talk about like that the production was such a wall for them to get over. And I'm like, oh my God, these songs are so amazing. Like I love these songs. And so I get, I guess it is. I guess if the production's like more rough, it doesn't bother me at all. Like if the songs are that, if the songs are interesting, but I will notice, I realize I will notice if something's overproduced, it can get, I remember first hearing Napalm Death's Harmony Corruption, which was their first, God, was that on Earache? I want to say like Earache made a deal with like Columbia Records or something to distribute bands, here in the States. And I feel like a lot of these bands maybe got a bigger budget to do better sounding albums, but like I think Napalm, I don't know if that was a part of this deal, Harmony Corruption, like they just got a better recording setup, but it was noticeably like smoothed out and polished or something in a way I didn't like. I think it might have been recorded at Morris Sound Studios. I'm not sure. That's that place in Florida where it was Florida's version of what was that one in Sweden? Sunlight Studios in Sweden, where and all those bands can record. Yeah, I think Morris Sound is like maybe like Death and Morbid Angel and all those guys recorded there. I think I'm probably getting this all wrong. It's funny. I think about this. Fenriz from Dark Throne.
Yes.
Yeah. He has this great. You can look it up on YouTube. He has this great like Fenriz metal history class where he talks about the evolution of metal leading up to, I don't know if the ultimate point is to get to black metal, but he'll talk, he lists all these facts and he's like, well, there's probably guys out there older than me that were like, no, Fenriz, you have it all wrong, Fenriz. So now that's in the back of my head. I'm talking about this stuff and I probably have half of it wrong.
It is Morris Sound, and Morris Sound, well, here, I looking up on their Wikipedia page real quick, bands recorded at Morris Sound Studios. You have Death, of course,
Yeah.
and Control Denied, the side project of Death, Sepultura,
Yeah.
Napalm Death, Obituary, Cannibal
Yeah. Yeah.
Corpse,
Yeah. Yeah.
Deicide,
Yeah.
6 Feet Under, uh, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Camelot,
Different.
and probably the one that sticks out the most for me as being weird, Seven Mary Three. So, and then just a ton of other bands. But yeah, it was definitely like we kind of brought up like the whole genre thing. Like there's like the Florida death metal and then like the Swedish death metal.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
and so I feel like that Harmony Corruption got like a production that they weren't. Because not, I mean, I don't, there's plenty of stuff I think that was recorded there that I like the sound of. But for whatever reason, Harmony Corruption, I remember thinking like, oh man, I feel like all the edges have been smoothed off or something. And maybe, I forget if that might have also been when the new singer came in, who was great, but I just might have not been prepared for all the changes. Either way, there's been other things too where I know that like a more polished sound will sometimes bother me, but this is a long way to answer that guy's question of like I don't really think about production, and that was brought to my attention very clearly talking to other Godflesh fans about someone like thinking this album had a great bass sound or that and that makes the album or breaks it, and to me I'm sure I appreciate it on some level, but I'm more focused on something else. Like, oh, wow. Like, this is great repetitive intro that goes on for 20 minutes before some switches to some other part, I'm not really thinking about the production as much as, other parts.
It's kind of great hearing that because as someone who's, making their own music and just obsessing way too much about a lot of the production of it and all that, it's nice to know that there's people out there who are like, just you vibe on the song. Yeah,
but I wonder if it's frustrating too in a way because it's like the comics version of that is like because I know I would like I don't feel like I can. I wish I had that ability to like again going back to Lawrence Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how he works, but I feel like he's so good. He's beyond like he gets the real feeling of stuff. When I look at his stuff, it's actually scary or actually like whoa, these scenes that he draws, and I spend a lot of time being like, God, did I get the right amount of fingers or like, are these windows looking right on this building? And none of it matters, or most of the time it doesn't, it reads perfectly well without that level of, trying to get everything right. And in fact, that can get in the way. And so but it's funny that, I appreciate, I don't know, I guess music, because music's so foreign to me, I guess. So like, I'd love it because I don't know how it happens. Like, I'm so appreciative of musicians because I don't know how it works or where it comes from. And I don't really have a critical point to stand on.
Yeah, you appreciate the thing of itself. It's this, so a band, you listen to a song from a band, like, this is the song from the band. You're not like, oh, I wonder what the guitar tone is. Is that a 5150? Yeah. Is that a Marshall, or is this an amp sim, or is this, what guitar are they using? What pickups are they using? You don't go down that rabbit hole. You're just like, this is a cool song. I like this part.
Exactly. And I wish I could draw comics like I appreciate music, if that makes any sense. Like,
I totally get it. And while I can do that myself with music, it's not as it's more frequent for me to want to like dissect it. So yeah, I wish I could apply that to art as well. Just like, just just keeping, I guess, my the big picture in mind as opposed to just obsessing over the details that no one but me is going to notice.
Yeah. And just getting the vibe of the thing. I really, when an artist does that, really well, when you don't feel like they're trying to get this exact model car right or whatever, when they just get the sort of emotions of the people across and the mood of I don't know, the time of day or whatever. There's just some people who do it so well that I'm just like, wow, this is probably like close to the closest to how I'm like amazed with music, which I generally am like way more amazed with than art. And that sounds crappy, but I mean, but because my critical brain is always on with art, I think, and it's not that I just accept any music I hear, but I think I'm just more like enthralled with it because I don't know how it's made, or I mean, obviously I get how it's made on a very basic technical level, but I really don't know how a musician sort of like how their brain works and how it comes, how they translate it into, so it's just all magic to me. I'm just like, wow.
That makes perfect sense to me.
But yeah, so.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, you mentioned just artists just being able to just like capture a vibe or a mood, or it's like someone like Chris Samnee, like with like 5 lines, he's like, you're like, oh, he's gotten it down so much, like exactly, and you would, if someone's like put a gun to your head, like, what else should he do to this drawing? You're like, I don't what. No, I don't know.
There's always a gun just waiting.
Yeah. Tell him to put more lines. Where's the next line going to go? Like, I don't know, man.
There's another.
It's perfect.
Yeah, if we can circle back to comics, I don't know if you want to keep it.
No, keep going. Let's go comics.
But there's this guy, and full disclaimer, I'm friends with this guy, but it doesn't really matter. Mr. Roosh. He has this book called Home for Little Conjurers. And it's this again, I don't normally sort of seek out horror comics, but it's just, man, he just captures something. He's just got I've been a fan of his work for a long, long time. We've known each other for a long, long time. And I think there's just a preview issue of it out right now that he puts out himself, but he's working on a full length. And that thing, it's like what I appreciate about what I said about Lawrence Campbell's work. It's just something where I feel like he doesn't need to show you he can draw a house or something.
Mm-hmm.
He just gets the, he puts down what he needs to put down to that you get the really creepy wrong vibe of the scene or something, or yeah, I really respond to that. I like his work quite a bit. But that's something that, I was like, oh man, like I try not to do too much preparation for this show because I feel like that would be very stilted. But I did put a couple books on my table being like, oh, I don't want to forget to bring these up. Mr. Roosh's Home for Little Conjurers is awesome. And I want to say it's kind of funny. It's very dark, some of the stuff that happens, but I also think, there's, I don't want to give anything away, but when bad people get, mutilated in horrible ways by monsters or something, there can be a certain grim humor to it,
Who doesn't love a good comeuppance, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But I put that on my desk, and I put I Walk with Monsters on my desk, and what else did I put on here that I just didn't want to overlook? Oh man, there's this guy, Ansis Purins, who has a book coming out now. I think you can order it now, called Super Magic Forest. And it is like, it's kind of like a meeting of Lord of the Rings in Jellystone Park or something. It's just got this innate, like awesome, like Hanna-Barbera cartooning style, but this kind of, elaborate folklore that's all of his own. Because I don't own a lot of original comic book art, which, I'd love to own tons of it, but I just, I don't have a giant collection of it, but I have a few pages from that. I was like, I made it a priority to buy a few pages from Super Magic Forest.
That's awesome. I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's it's not. You seem like your interests go, the full range. It's definitely it's not a traditional superhero title kind of thing.
No, I not that I don't like superhero titles, not that I wouldn't be drawn back into one, but these days, I kind of am looking for something that's not that directly. Like, it's because, as I've started to, figure out what I want to do with my own comics and things like that, it's like, well, traditional superhero stuff isn't really that. So I'm kind of feeling more interested in feeding my reference or my, my intake of creativity from stuff that is not that.
Yeah.
And it's not that I've never been drawn to that stuff before, or, I think Invincible, it's a superhero book, one of my favorite books of all time. But so is, of course I'm going to blank on I'm talking.
Yeah.
But let's say, I talk about this book a lot, but We Three, it's not a superhero book. Yeah, it was Vertigo DC, but that is such not a superhero book. But it's something that's different, or something like Revival from Image, bringing Mike Norton and Tim Seeley back around in the conversation, or
yeah.
Or God Hates Astronauts. Just stuff that that kind of has those leanings of it, but it's not that. Or Black Sad, or
Oh God, Black Sad. Jeez. Or,
as I've mentioned in the last episode, and was going to bring up sooner or later, Lake of Fire. Like, it's stuff that's just, I don't have. I think it's just it's easier for me to not have expectations of what's going to happen, so I can be surprised more. I can find myself to be more engaged than I normally would be with a superhero book, knowing that whatever happens may be well done, it may be well, beautifully drawn, beautifully written. Eventually, it's going to be reset. It's going to be turned back around. And that shouldn't matter. But I still have that expectation in the back of my head, like, okay, well, there's going to be a reset of the status quo at some point. But with...
I totally get that.
But with, like, the Sixth Gun, there was, let me look for another book on my shelf, because of course I can't pull anything from my brain.
That's why I responded to so much with, like, Mr. Rush's Home for Little Conjurers and Ansis Burns' Super Magic Forest, is that, God, these are like worlds that could only come from these people, you know? Like, it's, and I love that. It's like, I'm not saying there isn't I'm not going on this tangent of, like, about superhero comics, or whether I like them or don't, but because there's plenty of stuff I do like, but it's just something that can only come from, like a world of characters and a whole vibe that could only come from this particular creator. I mean, that's just always such a treat, and it's just, something I really appreciate.
No, that's an excellent point. I think the level of talent working on, big two superhero books is, the highest it's probably ever been, in terms of just quality and, and there's a lot of great stories and a lot of, I can say, like, even though it's a couple years old at this point, but like the latest, the Wolverine series with Tom Taylor, where the female Wolverine takes over. That was a fantastic series.
I heard good things about
Lots of great art in there. But like you said, there's something about stories where it's like, it's entirely from this creator, from this person, and it's just so uniquely, them, that you're not going to get that anywhere else. You can get superhero stories from, every creator. We all have, I'm sure all of us have, a few pitches in us for stories. And again, not speaking to the quality of them, I'm sure they'd be great. There's some I've heard from friends and guests that I'm like, I want to read this. This is amazing. But it's like, there's just that extra little bit for me right now of having something that's not that, something that's just, again, it can be unexpected. It can be just go in directions I would not expect, or just, not anticipate, and just, hook me in different ways. Something like Paper Girls, or like...
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think, I hope no one comes away from this thinking we're at all
No,
talking
no.
bad or dismissing superhero books. Not in the slightest. It's just right now, that's just kind of where my interest is. And, that's, something that's always kind of like drawn me to your work. 'Cause you have done work for, other companies and all that, but a lot of your stuff is not that. It's not, general, you've done stuff for the Jim Henson Storyteller, you've done stuff for Hellboy, but you got Barbarian Lord and Folk Lords and Lake of Fire and this Metal Quest thing.
Yeah,
that I'm
well,
like
that I'm excited about.
that I'm really excited to see, because one of the books I recently talked about was Black Metal from Chuck Beatty.
Yes, I did listen to that.
Yeah.
And
and I'm not only did I end up loving that book and finding out that Chuck put out a really cool album.
Amazing.
I got the chance to befriend Chuck on social media because of that, and he's actually the last episode and this episode he's sponsoring the show a little bit, and
I heard that on your last. That's really cool. I don't think I've ever heard a sponsorship work like that one before. That was really neat with the download codes and
that's reading that story. It was just like, it was unexpected to me because Black Metal. Like, I had the first volume for a couple years, and I'm like, I got to read this. Like, it piqued my interest to buy it. I got to read this, and it started off like, okay, cool. I like this. I dig the story, and then it just ended up going into this other direction a bit, where I'm like, oh, this is actually like a really sweet like story, and like all these different things that I wouldn't expect. I
think that, like, if it's just I feel like I've seen things, and I'm not in danger of naming names because I can't think of anything at the moment, but I feel like there's things that like rely on the tropes, and that only works for so long.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh yeah, this is all metal stuff, and it's, if you don't have a real story there,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't, the surface details get, no matter how like cool they are to think about, they can't really carry a story just jumbling those together, so you got to have something, at the heart of it.
Yeah, a story that comes up to mind, I will name names on that. I will bring up books. Murder Falcon from Daniel Warren Johnson.
Oh yeah,
like the general idea of the musicians having these, I guess, not totems, so to speak, but just like these like physical monstrous manifestations of their music and their ability, and they're having to fight against something and unite and all that. That sounds cool enough as in its own. It sounds very metal, but then underlying it is a very sweet and a very emotional story. It's like, again,
oh man, those covers. Sorry, I did interrupt, but yeah, when I saw those covers coming out, the ones that like reference, like,
oh yeah, those are amazing.
Yeah, like Maiden, Somewhere in Time, and the Bolt Thrower, War Master cover. I was like part of me, there was like 90% of me was like, that is awesome. And then there's like this little 10% was like, oh man, why didn't I think of that?
Totally. Yeah. Those were some great covers too. And it's just, but yeah, it's kind of that, that's just something it's unique to create our own stories and that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to ask you, I want to ask you about Metal Quest, but I know it's still kind of like in its...
Yeah, the unfortunate thing with that is that Tom and I both have like other, official projects that,
mm-hmm.
That we signed contracts for or whatever. And so Metal Quest just keeps getting pushed back. And it's mainly, I'm really the thing that slows it down, because Tom has put in a ton of work into the script. He sent me a bunch of, he's not stopped working on it, revising it. And it's so good. Like, I'm so into the characters that he's written. And at some point you just have to wedge it in. You just have to be like, force the time in to do it, because you can just keep saying, well, after this next project is done, and it's already like been sitting on the back burner for way too long. Yeah. But Tom's just an excellent writer. Hopefully I don't seem like I'm just promoting things for the entire episode, but if anyone wanted like a taste of his like writing, which is so good, he's got like a couple of like, I think it's standarddesign.com. He's got a couple of like short stories that he's written that are just so excellent, and they're so cheap. That's the thing that kills me. He's got these little like gorgeous looking books, and I think he sells them, little novellas, and he sells them for like $5 or something, and it's just so chock full of like original cool ideas and great characters. Like one's more of like a classic sci-fi time travel story that's really fun, and one is a sort of more sweet, kind of wistful sort of almost like character study of this character who sticks around on Earth after most people have left, and this robot. I'm not doing it justice at all, and they'll probably be mad at me. But,
it sounds cool to me already. So.
Oh man, yeah. Bygone is the sort of what he described it as, rebuilding friendships on post-Exodus Earth. And the other one I got here is Mind the Gap. That's the time travel story. And I can't really talk about them too much without giving stuff away. But it's just like sometimes when people's like, "Oh, what's going on with Metal Quest?" I'm like, "Well, it's happening, slowly." But like, I also like want to push those books, because I'm just like, if you want a sense of, the writing this guy can do, those are really excellent. And, he does comics as well. Yeah, I don't know. He's just a great writer. I feel very lucky. I think I might have posted earlier today. It just occurred to me. Someone told me a really like unfortunate story about working with a writer. Oh. And I was just like, man, I've gotten like really lucky. And Tom's been a longtime friend, and it's one of those things where someone you're friendly with is also like insanely talented. And it's just like, God, that's lucky. I know this guy. And like, the same goes for like Nathan. Like, I don't think I'd be working in comics if it weren't for Nathan, because like Barbarian Lord was very much meant to be. And stop me if I'm going off on like a weird tangent. But
no.
Barbarian Lord was just meant to be like a sort of like a personal project to make drawing fun, because I had been doing like a lot of like children's magazine artwork. Mm-hmm. I've done some for Highlights a little bit, and the magazine group that does like Cricket and Ladybug and all that, I did like, illustration for poems and covers and things. I used to like do all my work in acrylic paint and do sort of more colorful stuff. And actually that stuff was pretty fun. But then I took on a string of like, almost like textbook type stuff or chapter books. And there was like a series of chapter books where I was emulating someone else's style, like a much better known author illustrator. And I was appreciative to get these jobs, but at the same time, it was like not why I got into drawing. And so it was slowly just killing off the interest. I was just like, I was like really looking for applying for any other kind of work, just to be like, if this is how I'm going to support myself, I don't want to do it this way, because it's just killing my interest in drawing. And so Barbarian Lord came as an attempt to sort of fight against that, to be like, I'm just going to do something that's just 100% stuff I love. That there was like mainly like a tribute to the medieval Icelandic sagas, which I just love the language in those books. And then metal, like I was going to say a ton, but it's really only a handful of Bathory references throughout that book, and I think a couple of Maiden references, but and Conan and all this other stuff that I loved. I was just like, this thing is just going to be purely that, no aspirations for it getting published. In fact, when this editor called from Houghton Mifflin, or from Clarion Books, which is an imprint, I tried to convince him I was like, I don't think this is what you think it is. I don't think it's for you guys. Because it was like, I didn't create it for kids, even though it has a sort of a cartoony look. But I'm a massive Bone fan, so I'm sure Bone influenced the look to a good degree, and Mignola. Those would probably be the two main artistic poles for that book, Mignola and Jeff Smith. Yeah, I was like, I'm not gonna like amp it up for, you know, people who are like Conan fans, or like it's not going to be super violent, nor am I going to make it, you know, particularly, you know, friendly for, you know, it's just, this thing's like 100% I'm doing this for myself. I had done a couple like, or at least one self-published book of it, and through a weird like labyrinthian path, it ended up with this editor at Houghton Mifflin. And so when he called, I was just like, of course that's exciting to have some, like, you know, especially when you're never had a book of your own stuff published before. But I was like, I don't, you know, my first fear was like, you don't know what this is, you know, because I don't know what this thing is other than it's, you know, just 100% for me and I'm having fun with it. And I don't want to turn it into something where it's like, oh, now it has to be this to fit, you know, some plan. And luckily this editor was so great, whose name I'm going to forget and I'll feel super bad about, but Daniel Nairi, that was his name. He was like, those things exist, you know, that the more violent books for this age group, or like, you know, the stuff that's more aimed for kids, you know, this stuff exists. And he's like, I think what you're doing is something that is a little bit different. And he was interested. So that was very lucky. And then after that came out, I think that's Nathan found that, and he was looking for someone to draw Lake of Fire. He had worked out the idea long before, or at least I think he said a couple of years before we started working together. He had been working on this idea for a while, and I think it shows because it's so well researched. And he was another one. He contacted me, and I was like, oh no, I don't think I'm like what you're looking for, because it's like, you know, this is what I can do if you've seen Barbarian Lord. But I've read your script, because he sent like at least a script for issue 1 or something, if not the whole thing. Or he sent me something. I'm like, this sounds big, and this sounds like real action and stuff on a level that, you know, I kept myself fairly simple and cartoony because was a style I like, but it's also, you know, that was the sort of outer limits of my, you know, my ability. So the stuff he was describing, I felt like this is just way beyond what I'm capable of. And luckily Nathan was just so, he was confident when I wasn't. He's like, oh, no, you can do this. And so that's how that came out. And I don't think I would have just, you know, I think I might have done more Barbarian Lord for myself, but that book didn't really, you know, I don't think Houghton Mifflin would have published a volume 2. I don't really think that book, you know, it was a very specific kind of sense of humor, and I really appreciate when people dig it. But I don't think there was any demand for a second volume. So, you know, maybe I would have kept going on with it more as a self-published thing like it began, but I don't think I would have kept on with comics as a main focus if it hadn't been for Nathan having that, you know, that confidence that I didn't, that I could do something outside of, you know, my comfort zone.
It's good sometimes to have that person come and kind of gas you up a little bit, and, you know, keep, you know, have that faith in you when you don't have it in yourself. And not to say that you were like down on yourself or anything like that, but, you know, we had a little bit, there's a little bit of back and forth earlier today on Twitter where, you know, you were saying like, you know, a lot of the book is Nathan and his direction. It is, yeah. But again, yeah, as I said there, there's one thing writing something really cool, and then there's something executing it and making it be really cool or emotional, yeah, sure, or to sell it and do that. And, you know, Lake of Fire is one of those books where it's like, I can't imagine like anyone else doing that book. You know, it's like if you plopped like David Finch in there or whatever. Like, sure, they could do a version of that book, but like the way I resonate with that book and as I enjoy that book, like there's no other variation of that to me where it's like
that's nice to hear. Thanks.
And you brought up like the Mignola and Jeff Smith from Bone, like those kind of being like your primary artistic influences on Barbarian Lord, and I was kind of seeing those in Lake of Fire, along with like I mentioned in the last episode, like Brian Hurt almost, and then some Guy Davis, and which
well, thanks so much.
It's and whenever I bring up influences, it's I always try like to not make it seem like, oh, they're taking this from this person, this from this person, this from this person, and that's what they're doing. It's just like, no, I just kind of we all have our influences, and we can pick hopefully pick apart where we get them. Like your stuff looks like your stuff. It's just when I can see like the language, I guess.
Oh sure, yeah.
Like you guys are all speaking the same language. It's just different dialects, I guess. You guys are using different slang for things.
Yeah.
So you tend to draw into like these folklore stories. So I was just kind of wondering, like, is that something you've always been drawn to? Like, were you a kid like reading up on like Norse and Viking mythology?
Oh yeah. Although it was Greek mythology at first, and I still love Greek mythology. But that was like I leaned hard into Norse mythology once I discovered it. But like the books that like my parents had around the house, I think were mainly we had the standard Andersons and Grimm's fairy tales, that kind of stuff. But I feel like there was a handful. There seemed to be the lion's share seemed to be these like illustrated Greek mythology books that I just loved. And then I think the Norse mythology came from, I think it was primed by a few things. I think I was really into Walt Simonson's stuff, his Thor. And that probably was the beginning of it, but I don't think I identified it. I wouldn't have used the words Norse mythology at the time. I think I was just like, oh, Thor is cool. And then I think what really set it off was Bathory. I think finding like that Hammerheart album, which was probably the first proper Viking metal album. For some reason, that just blew up my, the sort of imagination, sort of like, oh man, just sort of painting those scenes with those songs, and just then suddenly I wanted to read everything about that, and and that was much later than discovering the Simonson comics and that stuff. I think that all these things sort of built up, and then the Hammerheart album, I think, was the catalyst just to go fully into it, and then start really building up a collection of books on it and getting into it. And then in particular was finding that book it was like a Penguin Classics like collection of the medieval Icelandic sagas. It's this sort of big, heavy, well, it was a paperback, but it was this really sort of fat book that was a great overview of the Icelandic sagas. And then after I read that, I was just, it wasn't even about Vikings so much. It was, I mean, Vikings definitely, was an exciting sort of entry point into Norse mythology. But there was just something, I don't even know how to describe it. There was just something about the Icelandic sagas. It was like this weird mixture of like, people having land disputes, farmers having like land disputes, but then there's trolls and, it's almost like the only, I know that they're not taken for historical fact, but it's like some of the only accounts that there are of the settlement of Iceland from, farmers from Norway when they left. So, there's sort of a historical base to it, even though you can't really, obviously when you have one guy killing 20 guys or trolls, you can't take it for a historical account, but it's an interesting mix of like, there are actual people who existed and settled Iceland in there. And then all this fantastical stuff, and then just the deadpan tone of it I love. Like when someone gets killed and they're not screaming or anything, they're just delivering this, well, now you've run your spear through me and our families will be at war for generations, or there's just this sort of deadpan style that I just love. And that was really the spark for Barbarian Lord. It's like, if I can capture any of that tone. I didn't think of it at the time that like this tone is just going to read like bad writing to a lot of people. It's just going to read like flat if you don't know what I'm trying to emulate. And there's no reason you should. If it doesn't stand on its own, it doesn't work. But again, at the time, I didn't care because it was just for me. But that sort of interest in the Icelandic sagas sort of became the sort of dominant sort of part of that whole, Norse mythology and Vikings and all that. It was that particular thing that just that interesting mixture of history and fantasy elements, and again the unvarnished language of it. It just all combined in a way that it's just like, this stuff is amazing. And how come there isn't like more, like there aren't too many films based on it? I mean, some of these stories are incredible. There's a couple Icelandic versions that are cool, but they're older and they're maybe there's a language barrier, so they're not as well known. But I like the Icelandic sagas were also like hugely influenced on Tolkien, and that's really well-known material. Yeah. And it's just, sometimes it baffles me. I'm sure people will get to it. And I think I've seen a couple times, like, comic book projects that I don't know if they came to fruition, but I feel like I saw some, some rumblings about, doing a proper graphic novel adaptation of, so-and-so's saga or something. But I haven't seen too many of those things come to fruition. I mean, there's the, what is it? The Northlands? I should know because I have this book somewhere in my bookshelf.
Northmen, I believe.
Yeah, which is excellent. That taps into the saga material. But like taking a specific saga and translating it directly. I mean, it's they can be long, and maybe it's a difficult thing to sort of work into a different format. But but they're so great, and there's just so many amazing encounters with ghosts and all sorts of stuff that I'm just like, man, this stuff is, I can't believe it's not better known. I don't think it's any great secret, but I'm surprised by the amount of people who I know who are into related material who, who've never read, or into Tolkien or into whatever, Vikings and things. Yeah. And they haven't read pick up like the saga of Grettir the Strong or Egil Skallagrimsson's saga, and if you're into this kind of Vikings and fantasy stuff, you're going to find stuff in there that you'll love.
I know there's a manga called Vinland Saga. I don't know if it's like direct adaptations or some of that stuff, or just kind of like taking inspiration from that. But I've seen that pop up a lot, and then there's obviously the metal connection. There's I forget the name of the band, of course, now. They literally have a symphonic metal band. They literally have a album called Vinland Saga.
I know exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. God, man, a list of metal that's
or just
a separate episode.
yeah, Amon Amarth. Practically living it. So,
right.
So yeah, I get what you're saying with the appeal of all that. I think it's kind of like the same thing that strikes the same chord with people of like the Lovecraftian stuff, like where you can kind of like while that stuff's more rooted in fantastical things, you can kind of touch a little. There's enough of like alternate history type stuff there where it's like some like deep dark secret or some like just ancient tale you've not been told, or it can only be told in whispered tones and things like that. And I definitely enjoy that stuff. I'm definitely going to try to make add to my ever long list of things I need to check out eventually. I'm gonna start digging deeper into there, because when I was a teenager I was into the Norse mythology, like, and all that, and just same thing with the Walt Simonson's Thor. Like, I found my older brother's copies of that, and I was like, that's it. Like,
yeah,
that's
God,
just the
that
stuff
guy.
is just so cool, and like, yeah, it's such ripe stuff. You kind of wonder, like, why, I sympathize with your plea almost with, like, why isn't there more of this stuff? Like, why are we mining this material?
Well, that's something that I earlier I was like, oh man, I should bring up, as far as like current, sort of things reading lately. I've been rereading Ragnarok and just amazed with, that guy is doing his best work now. I feel like, like how, that guy's amazing. And Ragnarok is one of those series where I feel like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I appreciate on like oh man, that's really well drawn, or this is a fantastic story. But Ragnarok's one of these few books that I just want to like get in a sleeping bag and like I play the cookies. Like, it just puts me back in, like, I feel the same way I did when I was a kid, going to like getting comic books, where it's just like, I just cannot wait to get this thing home. And like, there's very few that, I don't want to sound like jaded or what, like I really enjoy a lot of comic books, but there's very few that I feel that way about, that I'm just like, it's that same excitement from first discovering comics. I feel that every time I pick up one of his Ragnarok issues, and I just think that stuff's amazing. And that's such like I just think it's so neat, because that's such a little explored area in Norse mythology. It's like very like thinly referred to in the original source material, like what happens, like, post Ragnarok, because like, everything ends, but it doesn't really end, because some of the gods survive and things restart, and so, when I found out he was going to put this whole story in that part that's, was kind of hinted at and suggested at, but not really fleshed out, like a sort of post Ragnarok scenario, like, and Michael Avon Oeming also, taps into that in oh my God, I'm going to feel super bad that I can't, After Realm, and I just think that's such a neat area to explore, because there's again, it kind of makes me think like, wow, why hasn't this been tapped into before? And, but of course, the guy, Thor's dad basically is how I think of Walt Simonson, him deciding to, pick up in this territory was so exciting to hear about. And I feel like that book is just delivered on all levels. Like, I've never met the guy, but I want to someday, just to be like, thank you for this stuff, because it like really brings that childlike joy of reading comics. And again, that's not to say I don't super get into a lot of stuff, but there's a difference between, there's like albums like that too. It's like, oh, I really dig this album. And then there's stuff that's just like, oh my God, I'm just going to put this on repeat for hours and walk around and listen to it.
It's Walt Simonson. Like, everyone should understand, right?
Yeah.
If you put Walt Simonson stuff on a certain level above everybody else, with just in any for any criteria, like, anyone who's going to argue against that or say, well, that's not fair, they're wrong. So, it's wrong. It's not subject. It's an objective fact. You're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And he was also, now that I think about it, then he did some of the first comic books I ever had, which were Star Wars comic books. He had that run on Star Wars, which I think has been released as an artist edition. And I can't believe I don't have that yet. I might get off this call and order that. and because that was like, I think that the first comic books I ever got were Tintin. My parents got me Tintin comics, so I still like Tintin's a major influence too, and one of my favorite things. But right after Tintin probably would have been Walt Simonson's run on Star Wars, and then I don't even know if I would have put it together as a kid. I wasn't that perceptive that like this is the same guy, you know, because I was just like Thor is cool and Star Wars is cool. I don't think I thought of, you know, I wasn't as sort of aware of creators when, you know, it was more the, you know, scenarios and the characters.
Yeah.
Here's a guy with a laser sword, and here's a, you know, this guy with the hammer flying around, and this is awesome.
Awesome.
Tintin's meeting a Yeti, you know, it's all good stuff.
Well, Matt, I wish we could keep chatting for more and more hours, but I know it's super late by you, and I don't want to keep you up too much because I want you to keep on top of your work so you can finish Metal Quest. Because I want to read that book, and then have you finish that, have you come back on here, and we can pimp the hell out of it.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, I've had an absolute blast talking to you, and
yeah, me too. I hope it wasn't too mumbly, drony. I realize I started going off on tangents there a little bit.
The tangents are the best part. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about worrying about promoting too much stuff. It's like, no, it's, you know, if there's any mission statement for this show, it's like I just sharing what you like, what you're digging on, what's feeding your passions, what's getting you going, because, you know, that's the best way to kind of get to know somebody, I think, is just like, here's the stuff I dig, here's what other things that I connect to, and here's the things that I like, and I think you should check them out too, because I think they're really good. You know, I think that's one of the best ways to kind of really get to know somebody and get their vibe and all that. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, sure.
So before we go, can you let everyone know where they can find you on internet land?
Sure. I'm Barbarian Lord. Was it at Barbarian Lord on Twitter? I think I'm the same on Instagram, but I'm barely there because I don't have a smartphone. I'm still living at Cro-Magnon style with a dumb phone. But occasionally, but you can cheat. You can get on. You can get onto it on your computer and pretend that you're a smartphone and post. So, but it's just not as fluid. So I barely do it. Yeah, that's really the main thing. I think I'm mostly on Twitter. And then if you want to see an online collection of work, it's matt-illustrations.com. That also does not get updated that much, but at least it's, you know, most of my favorite, or most of the stuff that I'm, you know, most happy with, I put up there. So there you go.
All right. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I had an absolute blast talking to you, and I can't wait to do it again.
Too. I appreciate it so much. Thanks, Don.
Thank you for listening to the Comics Coffee Metal podcast. Please join us next week with my guest, guitar YouTuber, musician, pilot, all-around awesome dude, Max Carlisle, aka Guitar Max on YouTube. I literally just finished recording it. It's going to be a great episode. See you then.